The title of this paper is SÓKÈ, EndSARS Youth Protests in Nigeria. The right to peacefully gather and protest are sacrosanct in well-functioning democracies, and Nigeria is a democracy. Citizens who engage in such action hope for state response that produces political reform. It is also conventional wisdom that the welfare and security of citizens are some of the foremost responsibilities of a state. The Nigerian Constitution unequivocally states this in Chapter 2. Further, citizens and the institutions of the state should have consistent interactions to negotiate how public authority is exercised and how it can be influenced by people. Through the negotiations, efforts are made to specify the common understandings about the rights and obligations of state and society. The way in which public goods should be distributed and how inclusive, representative, transparent, and effective governance should be done are all things that democracies should be concerned about. They are collective tasks that involve both state and society institutions. State legitimacy also depends on well-functioning relations with citizens in quote, an organized and active civil society, unquote, according to Haider and Mcloughlin, 2016. So organized and peaceful youth protests should be seen as a routine part of social responses to state action. It is also clear that there are increased incidences of protests in our world today. Many challenge state policies and its institutional power, and the EndSARS protests also belong in this category. I want to employ a narrative form to look at what the youth are doing in the EndSARS protests. This includes ways in which the youth are defining the problems that they face, how they're telling their collective story, particularly in juxtaposing their SÓKÈ stance against the perceived nudákẹ strategies of the older generation. So let me give a little bit of a background. I'm a Nigerian American public intellectual committed to challenging inequality and exclusion. And I have a deep interest in the EndSARS movement from afar because I am in the diaspora. I have lived in the US for 41 years. Among the following things that I'm doing are, I've been trying to help some in the coalition to strategize, to edit press statements and position papers on how to respond to the situation. Also, engendering democracy is what I see myself as doing by emphasizing constitutionalism, gender equity, gender equality, children's rights, and women's rights. And I'm particularly interested in ending violence against women and gender-based violence. I also am concerned about working as much as I can to end discrimination against ethnic, religious, sexual, and other minorities in Nigeria. I have given advisory and referral assistance to NSAS protesters with Manifesto, Nigerian Women Speak Coalition, via WhatsApp and Telegram platforms, as well as email. I have also helped to organize and have participated in scholarly organizations' protests. One was by Lagos Studies Association, and the other was by the Nigerian Studies Association. One outcome of these efforts is Zoom webinars that we had that brought together #NSAS protesters and Nigerian diaspora scholars and Nigeria and Africa-based scholars. Both of these associations, the Nigerian Studies Association and Lagos Studies Association, are affiliate bodies of the African Studies Association. The first of the webinars was on October 31, 2020, and it was titled Police Brutality, Violence, and the Crisis of Development in Nigeria. The other one was on November 6, 2020, by the Nigerian Studies Association. It was titled Contextualizing #NSAS, a discussion. So there were more discussions in November at the annual meeting of the African Studies Association. Now, participating in the Zoom discussions on the NSAS protests, I also did one that OSIWA organized, Open Society Institute West Africa, with a coalition of international NGOs that have a presence in Nigeria, as well as Africa and Nigeria advocacy groups based in Washington, DC. These generated needs identified by the protesters as necessary for their continued success. I was also invited to and participated in the November 3, 2020 Chatham House's diaspora engagement on supporting democracy and justice in Nigeria with Kate Osamo, British Labour Cooperative politician who has served as a member of parliament for Edmonton since 2015. There were also Nigerians in the UK diaspora in this Zoom meeting, and members from Amnesty Nigeria and #NSAS protesters in Nigeria and the UK. Another thing I've done is social media campaigns in support of the mass protests via my YouTube station, via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, WhatsApp, and a blog that I have, and also LinkedIn. My intervention seeks to document the events, provide information, challenge fake news and misinformation, and provide fact-based analysis, diagnosis, and prescriptions to address the challenges. I also respond to Nigerian government policies and pronouncements challenging inaccuracies and lack of responsiveness to the legitimate demands of the protesters. Finally, I give expert advice and offer analytical frameworks to students, colleagues, and activists who reach out and solicit advice about sources of information and scholarly literature on social movements, particularly those using horizontal modes of organizing, such as the one used by the NSAS protesters. The outcomes of the protests have deep personal meaning for me. I'm observing and attempting to analyze the struggles as they have unfolded. And I will expand scholarly literature on social transformations by showing the relationships and differences between the movement in Nigeria, Black Lives Matter, and other movements for social transformation. I think we need to have better understanding of social movements and show the commonalities that can develop between them. There's also a need for me to reflect on my ongoing activism and to tell a story that draws upon my knowledge of Yoruba, the language from which the protesters derived their mantra, SÓKÈ, which means speak up, and also from which they derived nudákẹ, be quiet, which if attached to the generation could mean the silent generation. I also intend to explore the interplay between gender, generation, and sexuality in the Nigerian #EndSARS movement, a movement that challenged Nigeria's presumed heteronormativity in public as part of the youth protests. So I will make a pause now